Russian strikes on Ukraine, the largest aerial assault since July, and then just a few minutes ago, Moscow refused to commit to a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, though it's stopping short of ruling out any further talks. Now, the meeting was supposed to be one of the major takeaways, if not the major takeaway from the historic White House summit yesterday. President Trump even posted that he's working on setting up that bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. But again, just a few minutes ago, the Kremlin said it is only prepared to, quote, raise the level of the delegation it sends to meetings with Ukraine. And that really is the key this morning, to try to determine what the concrete takeaways were from what were very visibly good feelings at this White House summit yesterday between President Trump, President Zelensky, and all these key European leaders you're seeing on the screen right now. They left with good feelings. The question this morning now is, will they get good results? Let's go right to CNN's Alayna Treene at the White House for the latest. The president continues to say he's setting up the meeting. The Russians continue to throw a little bit of cold water on that, Alayna.
Yeah, I mean, it was very clear heading into yesterday, John, that was the goal for the president specifically, President Trump, I should say. He wanted to be able to get another meeting on the books that included Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky sitting down in the same room. And you saw him, he did have a 40-minute phone call yesterday in the Oval Office with the Russian leader. He actually paused his ongoing meeting with the 7 European leaders and Zelensky taking place at the White House to have that conversation with Putin. And then I talked to a White House official who told me he then invited that group back in, the European leaders and Zelensky, to the Oval Office after he wrapped that call to fill them in on what was discussed. And then, of course, we saw his Truth Social post saying that he is making arrangements for a bilateral meeting first between Zelensky and Putin, and then hopefully a trilateral meeting after that. But you're exactly right. There was a lot of skepticism of whether that is actually possible, when it could take place, where it would take place, but if the Russians are even willing to agree to that. And I think the key thing here is we're hearing them throw cold water on this idea. I remind you that Putin does not view Zelensky as his equal. He was the one who started the war that invaded Ukraine illegally, and that's really been a problem throughout this entire time. However, there's also not just the president here, but a lot of other top advisors to him are telling him that they believe that the only way to get this solved and to end the war is to have the two of them sit down in the same room and discuss this. And that's kind of what we heard from Besant this morning when he was on CNBC. Take a listen.
He invited President Putin to land that the Russians used to own. He displayed a huge amount of military hardware and then did a flyover. It was kind of like inviting your uncontrollable neighbor to your house and showing him your gun case. And my strong belief is that there will be a bilateral meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. And that's the only way to end this conflict, is to get the two sides talking.
I mean, what a way to describe Vladimir Putin coming to American soil. Hearing the Treasury Secretary say it's like inviting your uncontrollable neighbor to your house and showing them your gun case. So all to say, though, you could hear Besant there adding that he believes this is the only way to get Putin and Zelensky in the same room and try to end the war by getting the two sides to talk. But one other thing, John, before we go, I just want to reiterate to you what we heard from a number of European leaders yesterday about being one of the most important things to come out of this summit, and that was having the United States and having President Donald Trump himself saying he wants to help when it comes to security guarantees for Ukraine. A lot of them, Starmer, Mark Rutte, the UK Prime Minister and the NATO Secretary General, all saying that was a breakthrough from Monday.
Again, yeah, that one of the other concrete takeaway were the discussions about security talks. Again, we're waiting to see what develops. Oftentimes with meetings, they're not happening until they are. So we'll just have to wait and see. Alayna Treene, thank you very much. Kate?
It's a great point. And even as the Kremlin is refusing to commit right now to a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, security guarantees, as John was just saying, are at the center of talks for top European leaders still today. The French president and the British prime minister are leading talks this morning for the 30 nations who are part of what they call and consider themselves the coalition of the willing. CNN's Clare Sebastian's in London. She's been tracking this one for us. And what are you learning about what's coming out of this now, another round of meetings today?
Well, look, I think what's clear, Kate, is there is a very long road ahead to determine exactly how to deter future Russian aggression. There were a lot of positive noises coming out of the White House meeting yesterday. It is not nothing at all that the US is now openly embracing the idea of being somehow involved in these security guarantees, although we don't know exactly how as of yet. This is something that European leaders have been pushing for all along. So listen to the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer talking about this in a video he posted today.
Breakthrough when it comes to security guarantees, with now the coalition of willing countries, that's the 30 or so countries that we've been coordinating for some months on security guarantees, now working with the US at pace to work up those security guarantees. These guarantees will ensure that if there is a peace, if there is a deal, then we hold to it and there isn't further conflict.
So what do we mean by security guarantees? Well, it could be a number of different things. The French President Emmanuel Macron coming out of the White House yesterday talking about, no limits on Ukraine's armed forces. Russia, of course, has demanded in the past that there should be limits on the size of Ukraine's army, which is now the second biggest in Europe after Russia's. He talked about reassurance forces in the land, air and sea. There are certain countries, for example, the UK, that have already said they might be willing to put boots on the ground. And President Trump didn't explicitly rule out US peacekeepers being involved in the Oval Office meeting yesterday, though he was pretty vague about that. So the work continues. There's also a European Council meeting this morning, EU heads of state. Another very important frenzied day of diplomacy here in Europe. Kate?
Sure does seem it. So, Claire, thank you so much for following it for us. John?
All right, with us now is Congressman Mike Quigley from Illinois, a Democrat and the co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. The news we heard just a few minutes ago, the Kremlin, Sergey Lavrov, really a senior Kremlin official, refusing to commit to the bilateral meeting between Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky. What is that refusal, at least as of now, what does that tell you?
The Chancellor of Germany was right. Unless there's a ceasefire forced upon Putin, there's not going to be any other meetings. And if there are meetings, what will they actually contribute? The fact of the matter is they're missing the point here. Putin understands strength, not talks, not repercussions put off concessions made before negotiations begin. We're honestly seeing the beginning of a new era. I guess you'd call it the Trump doctrine. The U.S. will be tough until it's not, and we will reward invaders of a sovereign democratic country with land, and we won't hold that person responsible for the war crimes. He doesn't understand weakness. He understands strength, and we're not even using the assets we have toward that end.
You did hear the British Prime Minister call it a breakthrough in terms of the discussions on security guarantees. Do you think security guarantees after some kind of a deal would provide Ukraine with some of the safety that they feel like they need?
I guess I wouldn't blame Ukraine to never trust this unless it means NATO, right? They go back to Budapest. We're reminding ourselves that Putin has never kept a promise in Eastern Europe, and he never will. To them, I guess I understand the Ukrainians to believe that here we are going to reward Putin for his land acquisitions, and we'll probably see Putin rebuild his army, rebuild his economy, wait another year or two, and then go and finish the job. If anything, Ukraine has earned the right to be in NATO. They have fought on the front lines of democracy. All the reasons we fought the Second World War and formed the United Nations, we're now saying, gee, I hope he shows up. And gee, maybe we can get these concessions and maybe we can get guarantees. I was on your program at the start of the war. We were asked, what would constitute victory for Ukraine? It had to do with rebuilding Ukraine, getting their territory back, holding Putin accountable, and security guarantees, meaning NATO. Maybe we get one out of those four. No one can call that a victory. It's really appeasement. We want peace, not the worst kind of appeasement.
How much U.S. involvement would you support in some of these security guarantees?
We have to use our assets. The first thing we have to do is seize the frozen Russian assets that are in Europe, 300 billion, 5 to 8 roughly in the United States, and use that to help Ukraine defend itself. And we have to put the sanctions in place, which, by the way, Republicans and Democrats solidly agree on. It's rare that we see that happen. If you want something like guarantees and you want a uniformity there, it has to come with strength. You know, here I am, the liberal Democrat from Chicago, but you know, the lessons from 1939 are coming back. The voices of 39 are coming back, weak and strong. Chamberlain coming back saying, you know, some sort of land swap, some sort of appeasement gives us peace in our time. That's not what Hitler understood. It's not what Putin understands. I truly want peace, but if you go at it begging and pleading a brutal murderer, it's not going to work.
Congressman Mike Quigley from Illinois, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much.